Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well today. In this video, we are discussing the September monthly report, and I'm not gonna lie, it's not the largest monthly report, but we do have a ton of ship updates and some things to speculate on that end that are actually pretty exciting, as well as a confirmation of something we talked about in some previous videos. So there's still some pretty damn good stuff in here. Before we get started, if you are enjoying the content, feel free to stick around and subscribe. I do have channel memberships open if you wanted to go the extra mile, and feel free to join the community Discord. I'll have a link for that down below, and I would absolutely love to have you there. Outside of that, let's get into the September monthly report. All right, now starting this off, we have actually something in the AI section. We typically don't go through here, but I will say there was one thing that stood out, and that was an upcoming creature, the Yormidi. This is actually something we confirmed a couple videos back. It was in a data mine for 4.3.1. They say here the new Yormidi now uses different fire modes in its attacks. Issues with perception giving false positives were also fixed. Further improvements are currently underway for this and existing creatures. If you don't know what the Ormandy is, it is basically a Valakar variant. We saw it in concept last year at CitizenCon. It was kind of said to be, I think, a cave or jungle. I think a jungle variant of the Valakar, basically. But I don't think we're necessarily going to get it in a jungle, at least in this current state of the game. Regardless, I am super looking forward to this thing. I mean, it looks like a badass creature, and generally, I just like these Valakar type creatures. And the last thing for AI was Mission System 2.0. They're currently breaking down the work and discussing the best possible path to approach the implementation. I think that's great news. I would love to get this in the game as soon as possible, but I wouldn't bet on it being too soon. All right, and then the animation team continued work on an upcoming creature, which I don't think would be the Yormidi, and boss fight alongside supporting a new mission giver. I only say I don't think it's the Yormidi because they mentioned it by name in the next section here, so this is probably a brand new creature. And then facial animation progressed through new performances that were captured in late August. These include characters that will be present in multiple upcoming releases, including a returning air traffic control voice. The animation, narrative, and mocap teams also plan for their next shoot, which will be held at the beginning of October. All good news there. And then for the character art team, they finalized both new armors and a new gang. So that's pretty exciting. Work also continued on polishing the Yormindi, which is again that really big Valakar variance. The concept art team continued iterating on new armors. All right, and now we get to the big section of this monthly report, the ship section. In the UK, work continued to bring the RSI Aurora and Aegis Hammerhead up to modern standard. The Aurora progressed through the Lot Zero and final stages as improvements were made to the component bays, bed access, dashboard placement, entrance method, VTOL setup, and cargo access on the other underside. So just a ton of improvements on the Aurora, and it looks like they could be releasing in the very near future. So that's great to hear. For the Hammerhead, focus was on implementing the improvements made to the base corridor kit from the recent Aegis release, alongside making sure the component bays and relays are suitably placed and accessible. Great news there as well, just does not seem like the Hammerhead is quite as far along as the Aurora, and that makes perfect sense given the size comparison. All right, and the next thing here is that the Paladin progressed into the Laud Zero phase, with final adjustments being made to the main quad turret to ensure its movement is unhindered in both flight and landed states. The downstream teams kicked off their work on the ship too. Great news there. It sounds like most of these ships that are in Laud Zero are just very close to release, so looking forward to seeing that. Still should be something we see at CitizenCon as far as I'm concerned. Then the next one here is pretty exciting. The Misk Holby is now well into the white box phase. The majority of the interior was implemented to the required level, while adjustments are currently being made to the exterior mesh to meet the gate requirements. Great news there. It seems like they did some pretty quick work on the Misk Holby. Following last month's work, the Drake Ironclad and Ironclad Assault, plus the updated command module, are approaching their combined white box gate review. Again, I'm saying it here, these are releasing at Invictus next year, or I guess the Drake Defense Con next year. So looking forward to that. And then we have four unannounced vehicles also continue development throughout September. The first is approaching its Lot Zero review, while the second progressed through the Lot Zero gate and is now in its final stage. The third, a variant of a popular recent release, is receiving Greybox and Lot Zero work in tandem due to the nature of the changes. The fourth passed its Greybox review early in September, with the Lot Zero work due early October. Some of the downstream teams began their tasks too. Now, what I'll say here is that the four unannounced ships probably are going to release before the end of the year. I mean, they're all very, very close to being finished. For the third one here, the one that is a variant of a popular recent release, I don't really know what to think. I mean, it could be talking to like recent being the RSI Apollo, but at the same time, this is not the North American team, so it's kind of hard to say. You would think that the North American team would be working on that because they actually made the original Apollos, the many back in the trash. So I'm not sure, honestly. I would love it if we had an Apollo variant, but it could be something else entirely. And I would really love to hear your thoughts on this. Is there a recent release that is popular and could use a variant? I really would love to hear your thoughts down below. And then the North American teams began the month finalizing fixes for the RSI Apollo ships ahead of their release. Various optimizations were also made following player use in the PTU. Lot 0 for the RSI Perseus was also passed early on in the month, with the teams moving on to the final touches and downstream teams beginning to close out the ship. The RSI Perseus still should be set to release at IAE unless something drastic changes and they want to release it for like CitizenCon. I highly doubt that. I assume it will still be IAE, but that is only roughly a month away at this point. So if you are a Perseus owner, I would probably start to get pretty excited. The next thing here is also really exciting. The white box phase officially kicked off for the Drake Kraken in the latter half of the month. Last month's pre production phase led to numerous improvements and adjustments to navigation, flow, and interactions throughout the ship. Two unannounced vehicles progressed too. One moved through the gray box phase while the second entered white box. Now, this, in my opinion, was an incredible ship section. They discuss 12 ships in total here, not including the RSI Aurora and Hammerhead. So I guess 14 in total if you include those updates. Across the board, I mean, we are getting a crap ton of ships in the near future. Of course, we have CitizenCon and IAE. So this is ship time. We're going to get a whole bunch of stuff from now until the end of the year, which is pretty exciting. And I think we do have a really good chance of seeing updates to things like the Kraken and the Ironclads at CitizenCon. So across the board, I'm super excited for all this stuff and just to kind of see it all implemented, finally see the Perseus. And I would, again, really love to hear your thoughts on whatever the popular variance is that they're working on right now. Of course, it could be something like the Apollo, but I would really love to hear your thoughts on that. All right, and then for core gameplay, unfortunately, it's not a ton to go over, but there is a couple things that are exciting in here. For engineering, the team continued iterating on playtest feedback and hardening the feature ahead of wider scale testing. Again, they are mentioning the wider scale testing, which is tech preview. Really hoping we get that by the end of the year. But across the board, what I will say is that given how much we've had mentions of engineering in monthly reports this year, and just overall the amount of work they've been doing on it since the just beginning of development, I have a lot of faith that this feature will release and not be in some crappy tier one state. I think it'll be pretty far along in terms of its overall implementation, and I do think that it'll have a lot of depth to it and be enjoyable to use. This is all just me kind of assuming here, but I just think the amount of times they mentioned play testing, debugging, just fixing the feature up, I have a good bit of faith that this feature won't just release in a completely broken state, which is, I think, what we are all hoping for at this point. Next thing here is that the vehicle command module feature continued through its pre production phase, with the devs completing the prototype and technical design. Additional debug tooling revealed various issues with the underlying docking system, prompting an effort to fix critical flow issues. Great news there. Nothing much to talk about. Just again, hoping for those ironclads at Invictus. Flight gameplay also progressed throughout September. AI can now correctly utilize control surfaces in atmosphere and adhere to their velocity goals. Annunciators are no longer required to be attached to a dashboard to be functional, allowing for more flexibility in cockpit design. And then the team also prepared for focus testing of the improved flight model. There is actually a little bit of, I guess, drama going around about this thing because it already happened and then there was a couple of leaks regarding it. And then there was a developer response this morning about those leaks and how that kind of affects things. If you want to read about that, that is in the discussing whatever Discord, but we are not going to talk about it in this video because this is a monthly report video, though I will have a link for that Discord down below. Last thing here for core gameplay is the ongoing inventory rework progressed with the implementation of equipment and equipped item slots. Further functionality was added to the paper doll UI and search bar. The team also exposed controls to help define the rules of proximity looting. This is great news. I mean, I want this inventory rework really bad. Um, is it going to happen too soon? I don't know, but it really seems like they kind of saw our response to it on the SCL and just started to get the work started as soon as possible. So hopefully that means we see it sooner than later, but probably not too soon. And then nothing too crazy in economy, so we're not going to go over that. Mission design, not a ton here, but I think there's one thing worth noting. In the second sentence of the first paragraph, they say they also began removing old factions players will no longer work with and reorganizing the ones they will. Not entirely sure exactly what this could be talking about. Maybe Nine Tails or Frontier Fighters or something like that. I don't really know about Frontier Fighters because I don't think we've been able to work with them since the last time we did like the Fight for Pyro stuff. So not exactly sure what this is talking about, but I think it is worth noting that some sort of faction we will not be working with in the future, at least sometime soon. And then the last thing worth mentioning here comes from VFX. For Alpha 4.3.2, VFX finished up their task for the AST locations and final event work, while the RSI Apollo, Triage, and Medivac received their VFX passes. Production continued on the Yormandi, the creature we talked about earlier, and its related locations too. So nothing too crazy to actually speculate on there, but we should see it in multiple different locations. VFX passes also began the vehicles coming later in the year alongside pre production for upcoming locations and missions starting in the next week or so. And that really is going to do it for the September monthly report. Honestly, not too bad given the fact that it was a little bit smaller, especially on the core gameplay side. I would love to hear your thoughts on the ship news. I mean, we have a ton of ship stuff going on. We are going to get a lot of things in the next 2-ish months or so. But I also want to hear your thoughts on the Yormandi, the new Valacar variant of some kind. And are you still looking forward to engineering? I certainly still am, but I just at this point I'm just ready to test it out, see it in game for the first time in a very, very long time. We do have CitizenCon next Saturday, I believe, and I'm super pumped for that. I think it's going to be a pretty awesome event, even if it's not like the normal Citizen Cons. I think we're still going to get a good bit of information, and I'm really pumped for it, and I hope you are as well. That really is going to do it for this video. So if you did enjoy it, feel free to again like and subscribe and just stick around. I would love to have you there. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video.